Matt Miguez has plenty on his mind, and he's ready to share it with the world. It's time to hear the Miguez Mindset.
Matt Miguez here, host of the Miguez Mindset. We've got a great episode coming for you today, but before we get to the video, I just want to send a quick shout out to our guys over at Marucci Hitter's House, the new sponsor of the Miguez Mindset podcast. Great deals on apparel, bats, batting cages. They've got great membership options there as well, so definitely go check them out right next to Surge Entertainment on West Pinhook Road or at MarucciHittersHouse.com. Really looking forward to their partnership. Really appreciate them coming on with us. It's going to be a great partnership. So again, go check them out at Marucci's Hitter House, where they honor the game. Here comes Eric Lopez, the D1 bracketologist for D1 softball, as we get set for the NCAA tournament.
Welcome into the Miguez Mindset on a Thursday morning as we approach the final weekend of the college softball season. Talking bracketology this week for the NCAA softball tournament with Eric Lopez from D1 softball. Guys, when I tell you this man does a lot, he does a lot. He's the bracketologist for D1 softball. He hosts the In the Circle podcast. He's also the radio voice for UCF softball. Eric, really appreciate you taking the time, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's kind of wild that the season's almost, regular season's almost done here. It just seems like it's flown by. But, yeah, it's a busy time of year, but it's an exciting time of the year. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're right about the season flying by. It feels like just last week we were driving up to the park for opening weekend. So yeah, it is definitely flown by. But look, I want to start with the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. The last 2 years or so, Jerry Glasgow has made an emphasis on scheduling the toughest competition that he possibly could because he hasn't hosted a regional yet in his time in Lafayette. And last year, you thought that they were really close. A lot of people felt like they kind of got wronged in not being a host last year. They made it to the Supers, went to Washington. And now this year, again, the same thing, scheduled a really tough non-conference schedule. They actually struggled more than most people here in Lafayette would have thought. And now they're rolling through the Sun Belt like they usually do. I think the number's up to 88 consecutive Series 1 or something like that. I honestly can't remember the last time the Cajuns lost a conference series. But what is it about this year's schedule and the way that they have played that has put them squarely into the conversation to host?
Well, they have going into this week, they have the number one non-conference schedule, toughest schedule in the country, top 10 overall schedule strength. And this year, I had them hosting last year. I got that one wrong, or maybe the committee got it wrong. All right? Perspective, you want to look at it, I had them in over Clemson. I think what happened, personally, just my opinion, they were in position to host last year up until that Pac-12 championship game. Utah won it. They decided to flip it at the last minute, and Louisiana got sent to LSU. This year, the difference is they have 6 quad 1 wins, which for those that don't know are wins against teams in the top 25 RPI. Last year, on Selection Sunday, they had 2 quad 1 wins. So that's a big improvement. They have a win at Oklahoma, which is not easy to get. They were the first team to beat Oklahoma this year. I think that helps. They have a win against LSU. They did that last year. But I think the Sun Belt being stronger this year helps Louisiana. Texas State is in the top 25 RPI. Last year, they were one of the last 4 in. They swept South Alabama on the road. South Alabama is clearly an NCAA tournament team this year. They're a top 32, top 34 RPI team. Last year, South Alabama missed the tournament. So I think the league being stronger has helped Louisiana. And I also think the hosting bubble this year is not as strong as it was last year. Case in point, Florida State losing to Florida on Wednesday night. I actually think Louisiana has a better resume right now than Florida State. And if Louisiana is to take care of business this weekend, I actually might move them up higher than that 16 seed that I currently have. The reason I have 16 seed, I know some Cajun fans are mad about that, is last year they had a similar RPI 11 and missed the tournament. So I have a little bit of question, skeptical maybe. Would the committee seed Louisiana as high as the RPI has them? I kind of feel they'll drop them a couple seeds. They tend to do that with non-Power 5 schools, or soon now non-Power schools. So that's why I'm a little down. But they could still move up, because if they were to
Sure.
win the Sun Belt Championship, I think this year, unlike last year, they could pick up more resume wins. Remember last year they had to play Marshall in the championship
Correct.
game, which did not help at all. If they were to beat Texas State in their own park again, or South Alabama, that's only going to help enhance their resume.
Now, when you look at this Cajuns team, have you noticed anything with the way they play this year that has been different than last year? Because obviously, as a non-power school, getting to the supers it is an accomplishment, right? That's something that you should definitely not hang your head about. But for the Cajuns program, a program of great tradition, they've been to the College World Series several times. It's Oklahoma City or bust. So, what's been different about this team this year, in your opinion?
I think offensively they found their identity quicker. When they got off to a rough start, you mentioned earlier, part of the issue is defensively. It seemed like every game they were making a couple errors a
Yep.
game. You're like, can they field the ball? Period. And I think it took Jerry a while to kind of figure out their defense a little bit. I think it took them a little while longer to figure out who they were. But if you look at them post that Oklahoma win, they've been a different team. I think they know who their pitchers are. I don't know if they're as good pitching wise as last year, but they know who they are from an arm standpoint. And I think offensively they've made up for it. They know their identity. That's the thing. I think last year at times you knew they were good pitching wise, but their offense was more inconsistent. Timely
Right.
hitting, for example. I think this year they're a better timely hitting team situational. We saw that in their series win against Texas State. We've seen that in their sweep of South Alabama. We certainly saw that recently in their win over LSU when they jumped all over them. So I think that's been the difference from this year's team to last year's team. And I think there's the returners on that team. They have that confidence that, hey, last year we won a regional. Whereas before it's like, well, I don't know if we could get past the regional. I think there's that extra boost of confidence that a
Certainly.
team has after the success from last year with the leadership that they have from the returners from last year.
Now let's go to the other side of the Atchafalaya Basin with LSU. Beth Torina's squad started off the season red hot, 24-0. I think was the start to their year. Was as high as number 3 in the country at one point. And then, things kind of started to unravel a little bit. They lost Danica Coffey for the year to an injury. They've had to shuffle around the lineup a little bit, and they've had some up and downs in the second half of the year, but still poised to be a top 8 national seed. What have you seen recently from the Tigers that has you putting them in that 5 spot?
Well, first of all, LSU has the third toughest schedule in the country. They've got 3 top 10 wins in their resume, 11 quad 1 wins, 20 wins
Incredible.
against quad 1 and 2 combined, which is top 50. 0 losses outside the top 50. I think people kind of forget that when LSU, like, oh, they lost another game or they lost this, where they're losing to quality teams, and usually that benefits you from a resume standpoint. Case in point, last year, Alabama. Remember, Alabama jumped into a top 8 seed, shocked a lot of people.
Correct.
But the reason why was the committee liked the fact that they didn't have bad losses and they had wins in the top 10. Now, I think LSU's a bubble top 8 host. They still got work to do. They got Liberty this weekend. That's a must-series win, obviously. And I think, depending on how the SEC tournament breaks out, they may have to win a game or two to secure a top 8 seed. Because I think there's, as we talk right now, I think there's 6 locks in the top 8 seed. In no particular order. I think it's Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Duke, Stanford, UCLA. I have a feeling all the metrics seem to like him and things like that. I think those 6 are going to be in the top 8. So that leaves you 2 spots. And I think those 2 spots are between an LSU, a Georgia, maybe an Oklahoma State, an Arkansas, maybe somebody else that makes a run in the SEC tournament. That's what LSU's fighting with. And LSU now is in the clubhouse as far as the SEC games are concerned for the regular season. They're going to play Liberty in the non-conference.
Correct.
How do teams do around them plays a factor. Arkansas has been on fire. They host Ole Miss. Georgia has a series left. So I have LSU right now as a 5, but that could easily drop a couple spots. And I do think they may need to win a game or two in the SEC tournament to hold off teams in that top 8 seed. But what they do have is a ton of experience offensively. When they hit, they are very good. They're tough to beat. That's been the key. When they have struggled, it's normally because their offense hasn't clicked.
For sure.
And maybe the injury, like you referenced, has played a factor in their inconsistency recently and offensively. But I will point this out real quick, because I've had the committee chairperson the last 4 years. because some people have brought up, well, LSU has struggled recently. They're only 500 in their last 20-some games. The committee does not really look at that. They look at the whole body of work. That's what they've told me. Case in point, Oklahoma State last year. Remember Oklahoma State limped into the finish line? Everybody's like, they should not be a top 8 seed and all that. And what happened? They got a top 8 seed because of their whole body of work. So
Correct.
don't obsess too much about what LSU's record is the last 20 games versus the first 24 games, because the committee does not break it down like that. They look at the whole body of work.
Now, you brought up LSU being in the clubhouse, quote unquote. That's a golf reference, obviously. But like, let me ask you, what is the benefit to playing a non-conference series to close out the season? Because if you ask any golfer that has to sit in the clubhouse with the lead, that's not a great place to be. So what is the benefit to that?
Well, the good news is Liberty's a team right now that's in the top 40 RPI. So it's not like they're playing nobody.
Right.
They're playing a team that right now is in front of CUSA, would probably make the NCAA tournament. It's well respected. So I still think LSU will get some of that credit. They're just not going to get the credit they would versus an SEC series win.
Right.
I think the other benefit is, honestly, it gives you a chance to reset a little bit. The SEC is a gauntlet every weekend. And I think, LSU had really didn't have a break through the SEC. They had to go through the gauntlet of playing the Tennessees, the Auburns, the Arkansas without a break. So at least it gives you a chance to reset from a conference standpoint and get you ready for the SEC tournament, which I think is important for LSU. They've not done well in the SEC tournament the last few years. They've been knocked out in the opening round. So I think it gives them a chance to reset. Not that they're going to take Liberty lightly, but it does give you a chance to reset your batteries and try to make a push in the SEC tournament and get yourself in the best position possible to be a top 8 seed and make a run in the NCAA tournament.
Another school in Louisiana that you have projected to make the NCAA tournament is the McNeese Cowgirls. Coach James Landreneau's squad doing really well on the year. Have the opportunity to clinch the Southland title this weekend against Southeastern. Give me your thoughts on them and why you have them going to Baton Rouge. Obviously, the in-state factor certainly helps. But how much does them not only playing Oklahoma, but hosting Oklahoma help their tournament out?
It does help them. You look at McNeese, James Landreneau, they've done a nice job. They were literally outs away from the super regional. Obviously, it's well documented how that ended. And I wondered how they would bounce back. Would they be able to bounce back from such a heartbreaking loss last year? And they have, which is a credit to him and that program and what they've built. 27th toughest non-conference schedule. That's what it's helped them in there. They've got a couple of key wins. I think you mentioned that, Southland's been a fascinating race this year. Those are the two best teams playing this weekend. I think McNeese is a 3 seed if they were to get in. I do think they got to win the tournament. I'm not sure their whole body of work is good enough to get it at large. I think they would be in the conversation for it at large if, let's say, they lose in the championship game. You mentioned I have them at LSU. It's been weird with them. They've been traveling the last couple of years. They have debunked the system. Usually teams like that go 400-mile radius, which the committee talks about that the NCAA implements on them. They got to Seattle last year. 2 years ago, they went to Evanston.
Mm-hmm.
They're destined for a bus trip this year. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be LSU because there are some other options they could go and bus in theory. I believe they could bus to Louisiana. They could bus to Texas, I believe. So there's some options where it's not necessarily LSU. I just have them at LSU because they haven't been there in a few years.
Right.
So you wonder if they're due to be placed in there as a solid 3 seed. So I would be surprised if they get on a plane. But then again, I was surprised last year when I found out they were going to Seattle on a plane. But James Landreneau, I got to give him credit to bounce back from a crushing loss in the regional like they did last year. A lot of programs would have fallen back, but he's got them back on here on the cusp of winning another conference championship and perhaps making another NCAA tournament. It's a credit to him.
So one more question that I have for you is, I'm going to use the cliche, there's still a lot of softball left to play. You still have this final weekend plus conference tournaments. There's still a lot of things that can change. But who are some teams that you're looking at as teams that could play spoiler, teams that could sneak into maybe hosting a regional, things like that?
So I think let's start with the regionals. If you're a Cajun fan, let's focus, because obviously that's the big question: is will they host and things. I think the one team you got to worry about is Washington in the Pac-12. Washington's ranked high in the polls. It's worth mentioning the committee does not pay a lick to the polls. They don't. That's not a factor in their regionals selections for hosting. But if Washington were to make a run and let's say win the Pac-12 championship like Utah did last year, they may sneak up and take a host spot from somebody, which is why I think it's still important for Louisiana to win the Sun Belt championship, to just kind of brush that off.
Certainly.
I think the three bubble hosts are, quote, Louisiana, Alabama, and FSU. FSU, that was a big loss for them. Their resume is not the strongest. So I think from a hosting standpoint, those are things to watch. Does Washington sneak up in there and become a host spot? Who's going to be the number one national seed? That could come down to the Big 12 championship in Oklahoma City between Texas and Oklahoma. They've been the two best teams ranked all year. Bedlam is this weekend. I think if Oklahoma must sweep, basically, to secure a 12 straight Big 12 title, if they drop a game and Texas sweeps Texas Tech, Texas has the tiebreaker. So that's something to look at here in the next couple of weeks for the Big 12 and the number one national seed overall from that standpoint. The other thing to look at, South Alabama, can they secure that third spot for the Sun Belt? Don't get knocked out early in the Sun Belt tournament. Texas State hosting with that veteran group, with Jessica Mullins and company. Do they spoil Louisiana's party and cost them there and win that conference tournament and try to get themselves back in the conversation to host as well? They were in that conversation up until that Louisiana series when Louisiana won 2 out of 3 in St. Marcos there. So those are a couple factor things to look at from that seeding standpoint. Pac-12 tournament, the last one ever. Stanford, UCLA, trying to secure top 8 seeds. Does Washington make a run? So I think those are some factors to look at. And then there's always seems to be like a team in the SEC that makes a run in the SEC tournament that maybe makes a run at hosting or secures a top 8 seed. Those are, I think, some of the factors to look at next week in championship weekend. And, like I said, is, for example, McNeese a bid stealer if they don't win the conference tournament? Is Liberty a bid stealer if they don't win this USA tournament? The American, if a FAU or Charlotte doesn't win the conference tournament, are they a bid stealer? So those are some of the things to look at. Big 12 trying to get 7 teams in. It would be the most since 2011. That's also in play in the storyline this next couple of weeks.
Eric, you brought up Jessica Mullins over at Texas State, and I got to tell you, I've heard many Cajun fans say that they are ready to not face her anymore.
I understand that.
She's fantastic. But Eric Lopez, the D1 bracketologist, joining us here on the Miguez Mindset. Eric, before you run, man, tell our viewers where they can find your work.
All right, find me on D1 Softball. That's where my bracketology. It'll be free now from here until Selection Sunday. We'll have updates on that throughout next week and into Selection Sunday. In the Circle on D1 Softball podcast there as well. We're doing awesome right now. A lot of downloads. Appreciate that. We just had an episode with Beth Mowins, Jessica Mendoza, Michelle Smith on the episode. So we checked that out. Certainly encourage you to follow me at Eric Lopez Elo on Twitter or X, however you would like to call it. I will be tweeting updates and my thoughts on the brackets as it evolves in that situation. And it should be a lot of fun. Look for D1 Softball. We have a lot of coverage throughout the country on Championship Week and on Selection Sunday night. So it should be a lot of fun.
Eric, really appreciate you taking the time, man, and looking forward to a great postseason for college softball.
Thanks for having me on. I always love talking softball. Anytime you need me, I'm here for you.
Fantastic. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Follow us on social media at ESPN_SWLA. We'll be back next week with more of the Miguez Mindset here on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 St. Charles.